I would be very disappointed in Joe Biden after that, and Joe Biden and everybody else to decide that the best thing for him to do is to continue on. It would be a deeply selfish proposition. And of course I'll back him, and of course I'll do everything I can if he does it, but I think it is wrong. And I think that there is a world in which consensus can be reached behind closed doors, and then people can go out strong with a consensus candidate that people say they're going to back.
Hey guys, usually on Fridays, I'm doing a big weekend interview for you, and we have a secret podcast for Bulwark Plus subscribers that is JVL and Sarah. But because you might have heard we have a very big news day and a lot of important things to discuss, I pulled the secret podcast over onto the main feed, so it's me and JVL and Sarah. But if you want to support the Bulwark and you want to get pure, uncut JVL and Sarah, and you have not done so yet, join the Bulwark Plus, plus.thebulwark.com. Hello and welcome to the Bulwark Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Miller. It's Friday, June 28th. And, we had a little change of lineup this morning. We've got the Next Level crew here to respond to what was the worst presidential debate in American history last night. I've got JVL and Sarah. Hey, guys.
Hey, buddy.
Hey, buddy.
Okay, so we have a lot of I did the Sarah there. Okay, we have a lot of takes on the Bulwark.com this morning, which range from Joe Biden should absolutely drop out to Joe Biden should seriously considering dropping out. So we will get to that. But I think it's important context before we talk about the Joe Biden machinations to talk first about Donald Trump. Donald Trump last night, in my opinion, gave the worst debate performance on substance of any presidential candidate ever, non-Donald Trump category. Maybe Admiral James Stockdale would be the only other one in the game. He defended a riot at the Capitol. He talked about immigrants taking black jobs. He weirdly attacked his opponent's son for no good reason. He bragged about his golf game, and it was a performance that on a scale of normal politicians, it was like a 2 on a scale from 1 to 10. And it was he promised retribution against his opponent on stage. It was a deeply scary and bad substantive performance, in my opinion. Do you guys agree with that? What do you think about Donald Trump's performance, Sarah?
All he did was lie. And, I just got out of a focus group. So obviously we're trying to focus group this right now. And it was not lost on, and these were all Trump voters who are kind of out on Trump. And so this is a category of people that we always talk to because we view them as persuadable. And so they were very aware that the performance last night by Donald Trump was filled with lies. And in fact, many of them sort of said that he was lying the whole time and that he was saying crazy things. So I last night, as I was watching it, was like, sometimes people say insane things, but in a normal tone. And for Donald Trump, saying things in a normal tone allows him to be winning, the expectations game already. And so I was pleased to hear these voters have it not be lost on them that the substance of what Trump was saying was problematic. He wasn't doing anything last night that made these guys be like, wow, this guy's really changed. This is so that is not where the voters were. And so I think that's good. Right. And I'll leave it at that and let JVL go.
He was asked about in any question. Another thing I should have mentioned, he's asked about childcare costs, and he's like, the migrants are attacking Wisconsin. He did not engage on the substance. Multiple times, Jake had to be like, the question was about childcare costs, and you started talking about immigration. So I don't know, JVL, do you have any different view?
I'm sorry, but let me just, to me, this was where Trump was being effective though, right? He's asked about January 6th. Anything he's asked about, he turns it back to his great economy, the problems with immigration.
Sure.
His prep was on how to deflect and pivot away from what are massive liabilities. Sure. And I think just you and I both know when you are sort of training people for debates, there's often the satisfy and steer as a tool, right? You're kind of answer the question only the way a little bit that you want to, and then quickly go to the things that are your strengths. And he was doing that last night and he was doing it effectively, but it's a question of can people identify the mendacity in there? But to do that, you have to be sort of read in on some of the substance.
JVL.
Yeah,
am I overstating it?
No, I mean, Trump he does this thing where he is incoherent, or he says things that are non sequiturs, or he just makes things up. Like, for instance, talking about how migrants. So, I mean, let's just, illegal immigrants are taking black jobs. Black unemployment is at the lowest rate it's been over a sustained period of time in American history right now. So what does that even mean? Right. I mean, forget
what
like
is
the
a black job?
Black job.
What's
right.
a black job?
But like, take the most charitable reading of that, which is just he means any job
Don't
currently held by a. No, but like maybe he means any job currently held by a black person. Right. Maybe he's not referring like, oh, that's a black job. He's just saying that job is held by a black person. Let's just pretend that. Even under the most charitable reading, it's just nonsense. Right. And then, talking about NATO. The parts where he was the weakest and Biden was the best were talking about Ukraine and Russia. And Trump talked about, he said they in this context being NATO, were going out of business before he became president. What does that mean? What does that mean? Like NATO
is a fire sale at NATO.
Company,
We're selling off the things that aren't nailed down.
So it betrays a person who has been president, who doesn't actually understand anything about how the world works. And but as Sarah said, he was reasonable Trump last night. He wasn't. I wrote about this earlier this week. There are two modes of Trump. There is like the Trump who yells about the sharks and the batteries and stuff. And then there's the reasonable Trump. And he did his reasonable Trump. So because he did it in a calm voice and didn't shout, and because he was confined enough that he didn't take digressions that were too long because he only had 2 minutes at a time. It was a terrible debate performance. But here's the thing. It
was a substantively terrible debate performance.
Substantively terrible debate performance. This is not me attempting to defend Joe Biden. I don't know how anybody counters that. Look, let's pretend Pete Buttigieg is up there, right? I mean, it's just Trump doing his Trump thing.
My dreams.
Yeah,
people are okay, right? Like people are basically okay with the Trump thing, and because he just gets graded on a different curve than any other figure in politics. That's what I'm getting.
Sure. Okay. Well, I mean, no, he gets graded on a different curve, but I mean, there was softball after softball he put out there for somebody that was doing the set. This is how we get to the Joe Biden of this. Okay, I wanted to talk about Trump first for this reason. So you've transitioned us, JVL. I reject that. I thought Donald Trump, he was only good on performance if you're saying that good is like he didn't like try to bite Joe Biden or like lash out at him. The only time he actually emotionally lashed out was when his golf game was criticized, which in itself I think is something you might have been able to observe if you were a deft counterparty. He gave opportunity after opportunity. Andrew Egger brought this up in the morning shots this morning. Like the Joe Biden answer on abortion compared to Kamala Harris's on CNN later. Like there were plenty of ways to counter. It doesn't mean that Trump is going to go down to zero or that he wasn't going to get graded on a curve or that it wasn't unfair. As David Frum wrote in The Atlantic very aptly, like it was a total indictment on this whole system that Donald Trump is allowed to stand up there and get treated like, granted, all that. Like, yeah, he gets graded on a curve. Yeah. But he still, even on the curve, was horrific substantively last night. And his counterparty, Joe Biden, was utterly incapable of making a single coherent point against him. A single one.
Agreed.
Like Joe Biden, if people are like the Barack Obama debate was bad. Like on a scale of all 0 to 100, like Mitt Romney got a 92, Barack Obama got a 71, Donald Trump got a 35, Joe Biden got a 0. Like last night on like debate skill performance, he went up against somebody that offered him plenty of opportunities, and like he can't do it. He couldn't do it. Do you disagree with that, JVL? Is that an incorrect assessment of Joe Biden's performance last night?
I agree with it completely. This is look, nobody has been. I said this in the post show last night. I've been very high on Joe Biden from like the minute he declared his candidacy in 2019. I I generally think he's done. I thought he was a very good candidate in 2020. I think he's generally been an exceptionally good president since then, and he has, like given a bunch of good speeches as recently as the State of the Union. And last night was the single worst performance ever on a presidential debate stage, maybe including primaries. And I just people who want to wave aside
performance, politics
Yeah.
or non-politics in the mass media era. Like what
people
what
who
else
want to
was-
wave aside this and be like, look, but I'm still voting for Joe Biden. Sure, I'm still voting for Joe Biden too. You to blind yourself to how catastrophically bad last night was is unwise, I think. And now maybe it doesn't matter. Like maybe 2 weeks from now, the polling hasn't moved and everything is basically the same. And maybe in the long run, Joe Biden's able to roll a couple double sixes and he wins he stays in the race and he said those things are all possible. Right.
Sure.
But just evaluating what we saw last night, if you're not troubled by that, then I don't know what to say. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I just don't know what to say, because if you look at that and we're like, yeah, no, it was okay. Like, was he sick? Sure. Yeah, great. I'm sick too. I get it. Was CNN terrible? Yes, CNN was terrible. Right. Did Trump just lie? Yes. All Trump did was lie. Right. Biden's performance was the sum of all fears. It was what everybody has always on the pro-democracy side has all the grabbing onto the arms of the chair every time he and up to this point, right, we've always grabbed onto the arms of the chair and then like he's done it and we've all been okay. Last night was the nightmare. And like, if you're not prepared to grapple with that, then I don't know. Again, I don't know what to say because I don't understand.
Yeah. Sarah, so I want both your take on this and what you heard from the focus groups. I will probably offering a one-person focus group. My very best friend in the world does not like politics, doesn't watch politics. We don't talk about politics. He never texts me about politics. He watched for 5 minutes last night. He was horrified. It was like, somebody coming in clean, your non-vote paying attention voter looks at that and is like, what is that? Like, what is happening? How is this real? So anyway, I'm curious your take on it, Sarah, and then whether there are any green shoots from the voters you've talked to.
Well, let me back up for a second. So last
Go
night
ahead.
I watched the debate at the Aspen Ideas Festival. So I'm out here in Aspen. So it's on stage.
So with average people.
Well, yeah, no, it's a bunch of Democrats, right? As best I could tell, these are Joe Biden's people. These are wealthy people who came to Aspen who wanted to hear about ideas and talk politics, and we all watched the debate together. And look, they were jeering at Trump when Trump would lie, like and scoffing and things like that. But also, like, people were in pain in the room. And I'll tell you what, so was I, because I knew we did like a pre thing. And in my pre, we had 30 minutes, the panel. And it was me and Celinda Lake, who's a Dem pollster, Mike Madrid, who's one of the early Lincoln Project guys who then does he was
on the pod a couple weeks ago.
He does. So he does a spin. Yeah. Okay. And then Eddie Glaude Jr. He's on Morning Joe all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So and Jonathan Capehart was moderating. And so we did our upfront, like, what are we looking for? And I said the thing that I've been saying on these pods the whole time. Biden needs to look alive, right? Like, Biden needs to go on offense. Biden needs to be able to go on offense. If he can do that, then these double haters, like, the main thing people are worried about is his age. He's gotta absolve them of that fear. And he didn't. And I watched the opening of the debate and saw how he looked from the jump, how his voice sounded. And pretty early on, I thought, it doesn't matter what he says because I can't understand it. And neither can anybody else. Like, he was talking too fast. He was clearly jammed with facts as though he was debating somebody else on the merits and substance of policy and not a madman who's going to lie the whole time. That early part where he was trailed off and then just said Medicare, like, and so I watched this I watched it and I started to, I knew pretty quickly, like, okay, this is it. This is really, really bad. And I knew I was going to have to get back up on stage after I had just made this big bull case, the bull case for Biden, and what he needed to do and how he was going to do it and how it was going to turn this race around. And I got up and I basically said to people, like, I can't, I both have, look, I have a job. I have a job that I want to do. My job is to beat Donald Trump. I am not in the electing Joe Biden business. I'm in the beating Donald Trump business. And we can't solve a problem without being honest about the problem that is in front of us. And we all just watched. And I was like, we all watched the same thing. And like, then Linda Lake and Mike Madrid both kind of tried to spin it. Like, yep, wasn't good, but like, this is about Trump. You make it about Trump. And I was just, I mean, we argued about it on stage. I was like, absolutely not. Like, here's the thing. I have been gaslit by the Republican Party now for a long time about Trump. I am not going to let people gaslight me into saying that what I just saw last night isn't what I saw. Because that debate performance didn't just open up questions about, can we elect Joe Biden? It's opening up a lot of questions about, like, can Joe Biden do this job for the rest of that?
Especially in 5 years.
Yeah, no, and nobody thinks that. And listen, I was in this room of Democrats, and I was saying what I thought was true. I told them I owed them my best analysis and not spin. And my best analysis was that I have not wanted to play fantasy politics. I have not been in the Joe Biden needs to step aside. Once it was him, I was like, what are you going to do? And look, I wanted him not to run again. I was very clear on that for a really long time. But once it was him, I said, okay, we're all just going to have to get there. But you know what? Last night, we have to figure something out.
Where was the room on it? How did the room break down?
They were with me. Yeah, I mean, like, Mike Madrid kind of did a little bit of like a cri de coeur, like, there's nothing to do but grab our swords and like be on offense. And like, people were like, yeah, like, I need that, I need some hope here. But like, people were also like, what, can we do something? Like, there was a lot of people who were just like panicked at it.
Okay. You talked to some actual voters though this morning?
I did.
I do want to get back to what Joe Biden should do, but I'm curious. I'm open to the possibility that every single person texting me and messaging me on Instagram and calling me and DMing me is wrong. and that people who didn't go to college or whatever saw a different thing than I did. Did you see any hope of that?
So here was, I said this before, my green shoots are this, that listening to those voters, they didn't be like, because again, Trump voters who were kind of out on Trump after January 6th, don't like him. And they weren't like, I thought Trump was great. No, I feel great voting for him. I'll tell you what it did do though. The people who had been leaning Biden over Trump were off of him. They were like, that's, and so people were talking about being embarrassed. I mean, there was words like embarrassed. It was words like, sick to my stomach. I can't believe this is the best we can do. And look, they weren't mean to Biden. They were just like, Biden's cognitively can't do it. Biden's cognitively not there. And that was it. That was all they were saying. And look, they don't think Trump's fit. They were clear that Trump was lying. Trump was BSing. Trump wasn't answering the questions. Like, they had, even more so than maybe I thought, they were on to Trump. But they did not think Joe Biden could do it. And they were all more third-party curious. Or a bunch of them were saying they just might leave it blank or not vote. Like, they're just like, can't do it.
I mean, it was embarrassing. It was embarrassing. I don't know. I mean, JVL is a teenager, so I don't know. Maybe you have some thoughts on how to how do you show that to a teenager and be like, America is really great. These are the guys that we have that are going to be the president. And it was embarrassing. And it wasn't just the performative. There's almost no point in talking about Joe Biden's performance, like on the figure skating side of things, because it was like literally just like falling down. Like on the ice. I mean, like there's no even point in discussing the performative part. The substantive part was bad.
Yeah.
He did not make coherent substantive cases. He got stuck in the mental cul-de-sacs. He got asked about abortion. He starts talking about migrant death, but not even in a way that makes sense. Occasionally he'd have like 3 good sentences and you'd be like, okay, all right, like he's making some good points here on NATO or January 6th, but then he'd start talking about something else, and then I mean, you're right, Jack, and it's like the transcript is as bad as watching it was. And so this is what Crystal wrote about this morning. It's like, I don't think that Joe Biden has dementia, but I also like, how do you look at that person and say that if there is a crisis in this country, if there is some sort of crisis in the year 2028, like, like let's say there's somebody threatens to nuke us, there's a Cuban missile crisis in the year 2028, that guy is up for it. And if the response is, well, have good people around him, Trump won't, Kamala will be there. It's like, well, then let's just fucking have Kamala or one of the people around him run. Let's have Tony Blinken run for president. I don't fucking, that is the reality. And this is why I'm frustrated with some of the wagon circling that we're seeing this morning.
Yeah, I am too. Look, part of it is like, I think that going into last night, I was deeply rooting for Joe Biden, right? He needed to have a great performance, and I wanted him to show the country he could do it. And if he had done that, that's what we'd be talking about today. But what we saw last night, the idea that we can just run away from it, I think is malpractice. And look, I've been fighting with Bill about this, or Bill Crystal, but like, he's right. And he wouldn't have been right if Joe Biden. Here's one of the things the focus group members were saying that I think is exactly right. They were like, it's not about age. They were like, I don't know. I know 82-year-olds who are super with it. And that's fine. They were like, they're both old, but like, Joe Biden doesn't seem like he can do it. And that's what they all said. They weren't even being mean. They were just like, it's not really about age. It's about what you can do. And he can't do it. And the wagon circling is a disservice to everybody. Like, and there are like, if Joe Biden has to, this is my honest, I think he has to do what is best for this country. And what is best for this country is that he steps aside, releases the delegates. I don't know all the legal machinations, but like, I think he can, there are ways to get around Kamala. And I think they should. I mean,
well,
I think
let's talk about that in a second.
Okay.
Let's go with the legal machinations next. But JVL, I just want your take, because the response to this is, okay, Tim, yeah, it was horrible. He was terrible, but like, he's been a good president for 4 years. There isn't any reason to have concern about a crisis 4 years from now, because Joe Biden's done a good job. He has done, like, that's cope, right? Or is there something to that?
I am slightly different from Bill, and I think you on this. I don't have much of concern about Biden's ability to govern over the next 4 years.
At age 86?
At age 86. I mean, I think it's likely to be fine. You don't often have crises where there's like a ticking time bomb, like, oh, we only have 90 seconds to come up with it. My concerns are strictly political. And here's the problem. We can be concerned, but ultimately we have no agency here, because it's his decision. And if he decides not to step aside, like, then I'll go, well, so what do we do? And the answer is, I think you make the case for Biden as truthfully as possible. And you say, yeah, no, it's a real, and you, I don't, it would not be bad. I honestly do think, and this is the first time ever that I have looked at it and thought, all right, maybe he should step aside, because, my Sarah and I have had this discussion 3 dozen times over the course of the last 2 years. And Sarah would say, gotta step aside, so Big Gretch or Warnock or
Shapiro.
Josh Shapiro, right, can do it. And I would say, there is no evidence that any of these people would be faring any better. And I am open to the possibility that if Biden took your advice, our advice, and stepped aside this afternoon, I am open to the possibility that whoever winds up replacing him on the ticket would wind up doing worse come November 3rd than Biden would have come November 3rd. I think that is possible.
Sure.
But at the same time, this is the first time I've looked at this and thought, no, maybe the better percentage play here is for Biden to step aside. And if I'm saying that, like, I don't understand people who.
Yeah.
who
It
looked
does
at
have to
last
be
night
him.
and wouldn't say that.
It does have to
It
be
does
him.
have to be him.
And this is the thing. And so I want to get into the process next. But let's just talk a little bit about right now, like what people should be doing. Like the people have to talk to him, like people around him. And this is what I wrote in the article this morning about Jill and Joe need to have a family talk, but Mike Donald needs to have a talk with him and Ron Klain. And I'm deeply concerned that everything that I've heard is that inner circle won't do it. And what I am saying to those people is that you have a patriotic duty to at least talk it through, like, and to at least be honest with us about what he's capable of and what a path forward is. Because like just saying like, oh, you guys are bedwetting and oh, you have to vote for Joe Biden anyway. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll vote for Joe Biden anyway.
Absolutely.
If Joe Biden is nominated next month or in Chicago, this podcast will be 3 months talking about how we need to elect him anyway, and he will have good people around him, and Trump will have crazy people around him, and it's an existential threat, and it's not a great choice, but it's the choice we have to make, obviously. But there's a choice now, and these guys have to at least talk. Like, I'm going to be very fucking pissed at Ron Klain and Mike Donald and Anita Dunn and all these people if they don't at least have a serious talk about this, right? Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, this is a moment where, and again, I think the Democratic Party in general, not universally, but in general, the Democratic Party's response to Trump and Trumpism and Trump's authoritarian attempt has been very good. They haven't played perfect baseball, but in general, they've been very good. Their response was to move towards the center, not towards the left. Nancy Pelosi, I think, conducted herself very well as speaker during the Trump years. Biden adopted a path of looking forward to be bipartisan and all that. The Democratic Party needs to continue to be good and responsible in this moment. And part of that means the party leaders need to have very serious conversations about this and can't just do the fall in line. Look, I mean, again, it's not up to them. If Biden decides not to, and as Sarah says, he's nominated, then at that point they got to grab the sword and go out or whatever. But this is a moment. There is still time.
Okay.
Yes.
Let's talk about the two paths. Okay, so go ahead, and then we'll talk about the two options here. Sarah, what were you going to say?
The one thing I'm on this the wagon circling. You're watching everybody do this thing. I'm watching everyone do this thing. Even the folks last night were kind of doing it. They were like, Biden needs to say this, and they were all like, putting their words in, and they're basically being. And Trump has all these liabilities, and they're ticking off Trump's liabilities. And I'm like, yes, Donald Trump is an extremely flawed candidate. The fact that anybody's not beating him by 20 points is a deep mystery. He's a convicted felon, adjudicated rapist, an all-around bad person with terrible policies and a terrible character. You have to have a candidate who can prosecute that case. Like the fact that last night, with all of Trump's many liabilities, like Democrats seem to be coping by attacking, Trump and listing all the vulnerabilities he has. Fine. You need a candidate who can make the case of those vulnerabilities. Yeah. And last night there were ample opportunities. And this is where I just want to, I'm not going to give the moderators any shit because they moderated a perfectly clean debate. It is on Joe Biden to fact check Trump. It's on Joe Biden to push back. Like that's what the debate is. The moderators, look, do I wish that we had a quick fact check function but like, that's not what's going to happen. You say there's no mechanism for someone like Trump. Like that's not true. There is. The mechanism is that there is an opposing candidate who can call him a liar and can effectively adjudicate that case publicly. And I think Pete Buttigieg would have done that. And I think Josh Shapiro could have done that. And I think Gretchen Whitmer could have done that. And so yeah. That's all. I think the idea that with his immense vulnerabilities, people can make the case against him. We will continue to make the case against him. That's all we're going to do, right? I'm in the business of making sure people understand Trump's liabilities, but like you got to have a candidate who can make that case a little bit.
Feeling overwhelmed by the state of politics? Finding it hard to get motivated? You might be suffering from electile dysfunction, but Pod Save America has got the cure. Talk to your doctor about tuning into Pod Save America every Tuesday, Wednesday now, and Friday for a real talk conversation about the latest, biggest election of our lives and zero old guys yelling at you about the kids these days. Where else can you get that guarantee? Nowhere. Listen and subscribe to Pod Save America on your favorite podcast platform or watch on YouTube. Pod Save America is not approved by the FDA. So just two things this week. Maybe JVL, you can jump in on CNN since you wrote about it, but then I want to talk about the path forward. From like the subhead of Frum's piece in the Atlantic, which I'll put in the show notes I've referenced, is the whole, the debate was a travesty because the whole premise was to treat a failed coup leader as a legitimate candidate for the presidency again. I agree with that. Like there have been a million failure points before last night, right? Every responsible Republican, the news media, the fucking Merrick Garland. We could go down a whole list of people that like, how are we here where we're treating this guy like a normal candidate? He should be in jail. Yes, agree. But okay, now we're here. Like there was not a single, maybe I'm wrong, but if you're even on a Biden Stan TikTok account, he did not do a single sentence that was good. Like there was not a single attack on Donald Trump across, like his most vigorous attack on Trump was on the golf scores.
Which is not, it doesn't matter, but like Biden was also wrong about that. Like Biden had to like retract his handicap. Ugh.
Okay. Go. Sorry, Jacob. Do you have anything on the CNN side?
Yeah, I would just say, go back and look at the Trump Biden debates in 2020, and Biden cleaned the floor with him. And Biden did this very effective stuff where he would sort of look straight to camera and talk to people and to his folks. Well, and what we saw last night was categorically different. It was categorically different. It was, you can't polish this. You can't. Anyway.
Okay.
Sorry.
So
I'm just repeating
all right.
myself
So
at
let's
this
go. So there's the process of how it would work to get rid of him, and then there's the process. Then there's the question of what he could do if we end up with Biden. So let's do the first one first. There are ways around Kamala, but not really. Is really the short of it. There is, it is about the convention delegates now. Joe Biden has all the 90% of the convention delegates. They're not bound. So there could be some sort of floor effort. I lived through that in 2016. If Joe Biden is like, it's really hard to imagine how you get 50% of delegates in a hostile attack on Joe Biden on the floor if he's in there. So Joe Biden has to step aside. I assume he runs out his presidency. There are a lot of awkward conversations there. If you can't run, why are you still, do you resign the presidency? But there's not time to nominate a vice president. So he probably stays in the presidency. And he could endorse somebody. It would be very challenging not to endorse Kamala Harris. And then if not, then you go to a convention floor fight like it's the 1970s and other people could put their hat in the ring. But it becomes very, I think just as a practical matter, you don't really have time for a real campaign. I mean, maybe the DNC could host a debate. Maybe you have a DNC debate the day before in Chicago or something. But I think it becomes very challenging to pass on a vice president that's the first Black woman vice president at that point. I mean, that like something would have to be. It's hard for me to even imagine the scenario. But go ahead, try to paint it.
Okay, so here's what has to happen. People have to understand that Joe Biden can't do it, and Kamala Harris can't be the person. Both of them.
I reject the second point, but go ahead, but continue.
You think Kamala can do it?
I mean, Kamala would not. If Joe Biden had dropped out in 2022, would Kamala have been the horse I would have ridden? No. Okay, like probably not. But like Kamala is capable of doing a campaign against Donald Trump. Like Kamala can criticize Donald Trump. Kamala can give a speech. Kamala can, go in hostile interviews. Anyway, I don't think that I reject that she's totally unacceptable. But I don't think that she's the strongest. And to JVL's point, maybe she ends up doing weaker than Biden. We're in a really bad situation right now. But I think that she would performatively be like a million times better than Joe Biden. Yeah,
I could potentially get there on that particular point. I do think that my best case scenario is this. Joe Biden steps aside and releases his delegates that Whitmer and Shapiro, some combination thereof, like the governors all get together, all the Democratic governors, and they say, we're going to back, and including Westmore, we're going to back Whitmer and Shapiro. Because here's the thing about one of the main reasons that it's really tough to switch people out. And one of the reasons that JVL kind of always put forward as an issue is like, these people don't have name ID. And that is true. Like they don't have name ID. People, the average person across the country doesn't know who Josh Shapiro is or who Gretchen Whitmer is or who Wes Moore is or whatever. But you know who does know who Gretchen Whitmer is? The voters of Michigan, one of the key swing states. You know who does know who Josh Shapiro is? The people of Pennsylvania, who voted for him by a 14-point margin. Gretchen Whitmer won Michigan by a 10-point margin. Two of the key swing states already have really high name ID for those two people. And they are Midwestern governors and they are young. And I think that if all the governors came out and said, this is who we think should do it, these are excellent candidates, they backed them hard, like the Democratic Party would have to be unified. And Kamala and Biden would both have to say, okay. Like it would have to be a Democratic family decision for the good of the country and for the best case scenario to beat Trump. And I'll tell you, this is a moment where people have to make a decision that is not about their own ego. I would be very disappointed in Joe Biden after that and Joe Biden and everybody else to decide that the best thing for him to do is to continue on. It would be a deeply selfish proposition. And of course I'll back him. And of course I'll do everything I can if he does it. But I think it is wrong. And I think that there is a world in which consensus can be reached behind closed doors. And then people can go out strong with a consensus candidate that people say they're going to back. That's what parties are for. It's the one thing political parties are for.
Yeah, and also just by the way, like we're the only fucking system. Not the only, but in most advanced democracies, the parties just choose who the prime minister is. Like, you know what I mean? Like this is how things work in other countries. This is not like a crazy system that anti-democratic system, right? But again, Joe Biden has the delegates, right? So he has to release them.
This is on
challenge
him.
To him. I guess is possible. I mean, who the hell knows? But it feels that is not going to happen. JVL, do you have anything on the convention?
Yeah,
question?
I mean, I think there are only two realistic scenarios for Biden stepping down in terms of who the nominee is. And in one of those, the nominee is Kamala Harris. I think that is overwhelmingly like the 90%. I think that's the 90% scenario. And the other, it's Gavin Newsom, because Gavin Newsom has already been thinking about this, right? I mean, Gavin Newsom, it is not true that he could plug and play a campaign in the way that Kamala Harris could. But, like the guy has clearly had this on his brain. And if Joe Biden were to step aside, I think we should be realistic that the alternative is unlikely to be Whitmer or Shapiro or
disagree.
Any
Unlikely,
of those
but we're in
people.
uncharted territory. I'll say I saw Gavin last
Sure.
night. I don't want to betray any confidences, but Gavin, despite the fact that Sarah's mean to him all the time, Gavin is apparently a fan because he recognized me across the room. He gave a very full-throated defense of Joe Biden last night. I think it's kind of hard to get to Gavin, really. To me, it's like if you're getting rid of Kamala, well, who knows? Again, it would be up to the delegates. Joe Biden would not be able to give his delegates to Kamala, but it's very hard for me in a party that's core base is black women. That like they're gonna pass over a black woman for a white guy who is her in-state rival. Like that's just not going to happen.
Can I just tell you why I think this is wrong? About Gavin. Well, but this idea that you can't bypass Kamala Harris, I don't know. I've been listening to voters for years about Kamala Harris, black, white, Latino. She does not have I think she probably does better with young people, but I've not heard black voters be like, oh yeah, I would be furious if they, people are just like, I don't really see her. I had high hopes, but she's not doing much. I don't think anybody would care. I think people over-index on this identity stuff in a way that I don't think is real.
Maybe. I also think that, though, the low bar for Kamala is, isn't that how the narrative of this stuff goes? It's like somebody steps up to the plate, somebody steps up to the moment and does it. Anyway, I don't know. Maybe not.
But also, I mean, she starts with the name ID, right? I mean, it isn't just that, right?
Isn't just identity.
It isn't just identity politics. It's that she is the sitting vice president. She has stature and gravitas simply because of that. She has been through national spotlight. She has been vetted fully.
I'm so happy. So if there's any doubt, we've got people being like misogyny. It's like, this is woman on woman crime. It's like Sarah's the one that's like ridiculous.
I'm not
listening
entirely
to voters.
convinced.
Yeah, no, I get
that. I get that. Not disagreeing.
Okay,
but just looking through, I'm not convinced 100% that if we could run like the two timelines, one with Josh Shapiro at the head of the ticket, one with Kamala Harris at the head of the ticket, I'm not convinced that Shapiro does better every single time. That's all I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I guess the other thing, this is my final thought on Kamala, and then I want to move on to what Joe Biden needs to do. But if you have a response to this, Sarah, but the subtext of a lot of this, the whole time that Bill has been out there being like, we should replace Joe, we're going to get Whitmer Warnock. A lot of the subtext of why some of us have been like, no, I don't think that that's going to happen, is because we've believed that it is overwhelmingly likely to be Kamala. Maybe not, maybe it won't be, but it's overwhelmingly likely. And up until 14 hours ago, I was like, that's a worse choice. This morning, I judge it to be a significantly better choice. Not guaranteed to be a better choice. Not guaranteed to be a better choice, but probably a better choice. Anyway,
lower floor, but higher ceiling.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course.
I'm exactly where you are.
Yeah.
Tim.
Anything else on that, Sarah, before we move on to Joe?
No, I mean, look, I'd be very worried about it being Kamala. I think that what we have seen of her, like, and this is just like, again, using my eyes, what I have seen of a person performing the job and doing the work publicly, it's been deeply unimpressive, and the voters don't care for her. This is the thing right now where I am. You might be listening to me right now, listener, and saying, but misogyny, but racism, but, the moderators, but whatever. And all of that can be true. I can stipulate every point of it. And the only thing that matters to me is beating Donald Trump, and who can beat Donald Trump. And I would just be very concerned that Kamala can't beat Donald Trump in a way that I think other people can. And you cannot like the way that voters judge Kamala, but the fact is that they do. Now, I will say, I think I agree with you guys, though, that because she hasn't been seen a ton, right? If she came out and she did perform, right? She just goes on offense against Trump all day long. Right. I think that like, I'm for that. If that's the option, I think I'm for that over just letting this thing go. I think I'm willing to roll the dice on it. But I just think if you're going to make a change, there are better options.
On our least listened to podcast of the year, it's going to be the longest one. So for the people who really want to suffer, and like the people who are like to self-flagellate, they're going to love this podcast. We have more to talk about. Let's say Joe Biden stays. What can be done? Our new colleague, Sam Stein, I sent in my hastily written Joe Biden and Jill need to have a conversation last night. He said to me, it was a good piece, but you should use your expertise. You used to be a comms person. Like, if Biden stays, what would he do? And my answer to that is basically, like, he needs to demonstrate that he's a human and not a robot. And like, he needs to demonstrate that he's up for this. The reason why this debate was in June was because his team thought it would allow him to show the American people that he was up for it. That didn't work. So he's got to go on Fox. He's got to go out among real people. If Donald Trump's not going to debate him again, he's got to find other ways to be in high stakes environments. He's got to be off prompter. Like, is he capable of doing all that? Like, maybe the answer is, the counter to that is, he's not capable of doing all that. And so the best thing to do is hide him and hope Donald Trump implodes. I don't fucking know. But to me, it's like, if he's capable and he had a bad night, he had a cold or whatever, then that's what he should do. Go out among people, be with people, let them touch him, and go on Fox and fight with. But I don't know. maybe that's wrong. Sarah?
I do think that there's basically nothing to do but, and I'll go back to like my fundamentals. The biggest coalition in American politics is not a pro-Joe Biden coalition. It is an anti-Trump coalition. And so I would flood the zone with surrogates who are ready to go on offense against Trump. And I would basically, like, you need to make the race so that it basically doesn't matter who the candidate on the Democratic side is. Now, I don't believe that to be true because I do think it matters. I think you have to give people something. But I would just say our only position is offense. Our only position is offense. And so we go hard with every person at our disposal. Everyone goes out and just says, Donald Trump is too dangerous. We will all be there to help. There is a great team around him. You got to get Blinken out. You got to get the cabinet out. You got to get everybody, be on a first name basis with them. People understand that a president doesn't do it all themselves. So you have to make the American people aware of and confident in the team around him. That's tough because I think their confidence isn't there on Kamala, but you got to get her out there a ton. Like, you got to let her do the job you think she could do as president. If she was running, she has to do that as the vice president. She has to become a top effective surrogate. And full-blown offense against Donald Trump. That's it. And look, that's what I'll continue to do, like, no matter what, right? Like, I just think about it as a strategist is I will continue to pound Trump's unfitness for that job. But I look through the eyes of the voters last night and they don't think either person's fit. And that's where I just think there's a ton of opportunity. Like, give them someone they think is fit. Like, the bar's actually not
give them someone they think is fit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jonathan?
Yeah. I mean, so if we're in a world where Biden stays as the nominee, if he is still able to do it. So last night was a bad night, right? If last night was just a bad night, then you just got to push him out there, right? And he's got to go hard on it. Exactly what Sarah said. Unless he doesn't have it.
There will be more cameras and more eyeballs on Joe Biden's next 3 appearances than there will have been on anything that he has done this year besides the State of the Union and the debate. Yeah. So there is an opportunity to do that, I guess, and it shouldn't be on a fucking teleprompter.
But if he doesn't have it, then the answer is that it has to become the Democratic Party versus Donald Trump. And as Sarah says with the surrogate, I mean, it really does. And I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you have every single high profile Democrat from Buttigieg to Whitmer to Newsom, how you tell all of these people, like, your job for the next 5 months is to get Joe Biden elected. Drop whatever you're doing right now. Go out and get on the campaign trail, and we're gonna use you as a candidate. And I just don't know how that works, because the other thing is, a lot of these people, if they feel like the ship is going down, why are they going to lash themselves to the mast, right? Yeah. And that's hard. Look, I am sick of this. Can I just say one thing? It breaks my heart. I think a lot of people listening are be like, don't you guys understand how unfair this is? Joe Biden has done everything we asked for. And absolutely true. It is deeply unfair that, as you said, Tim, we've had all of these other failures of institutions, failures of people, failures of the American public, which have gotten us to this point. It is wildly unfair that, like, Joe Biden is the one who has to be perfect every single time. But that's also just where we are right now. And,
I'm sorry. My friends that work for Joe Biden, if they see this clip, are going to be mad. But that's not true. Joe Biden had to be a fucking C-. That's what Joe Biden had to be. A C fucking minus. Not perfect. Okay? And he was an F. He was a disaster. And, like, I'm sorry, guys, but it's unfair to all of us. There are 330 million people in America. 70 million of them vote for Donald Trump, so fuck them. But there are 60 other million people in this country, and it is unfair to them to, like, continue in a hopeless, hubristic campaign that might end the fucking country. So if he can do it, then show us that he can fucking do it. But if he can't do it, he has to quit because it's unfair to everybody else for him to stay. All right? Like, this isn't about Joe Biden.
It's not about Joe Biden. That's right. That's right. And this is where I think the patriotic thing to do is to think about what's best for the country. And I would say, again, nobody could have beaten Donald Trump in 2020 from that field other than Joe Biden. God bless Joe Biden.
God bless Joe Biden.
God bless him. Now he has got to do the right thing for everybody else. And he could step away and he could bless other candidates. He could, right? A ticket can emerge of governors. Joe Biden can bless it. And like, he could do a great thing. That's a legacy and it would be unprecedented, but he could do it and they would beat Donald Trump.
One other thing, really quick, rapid fire. If you're the closest advisor to somebody, I won't name any names, but like some governor, and Joe Biden doesn't do it, do you go to Chicago?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't think this can be a hostile takeover.
Yeah, me neither.
I think it has to be a Democratic Party decision where everybody gets together. And honestly, I do think, listen, you need catalyzing events for things like this. And I think this is a catalyzing event. And I think that if the governors were willing to step up and everybody was willing to throw their weight behind them and Joe Biden was willing to step down and honestly, Kamala endorses them too. Like, I mean, everybody has to do the right thing here. And I think it's our responsibility as whatever it is that we do, people who do the analysis to say, come on, guys, you can do this, right? It's not impossible. I think we deal too much in saying like this couldn't happen. Why couldn't it?
Here's Hakeem Jeffries just now. President Biden is scheduled to speak today around noon, as I understand it, in North Carolina. I'm looking forward to hearing from President Biden. And until he articulates a way forward in terms of his vision for America at this moment, I'm going to reserve comment about anything relative to where we are at this moment, other than to say I stand behind the ticket, I stand behind the Senate Democratic majority, and of course we're going to do everything that we need to as a House Democrats to win. That's pretty good. I mean, that's like
Jesus.
Like that's the Speaker of the House.
Guys,
and by the way, Hakeem Jeffries would beat fucking Donald Trump. Maybe it should be Hakeem Jeffries.
Maybe it should be
Third in line
Hakeem
to the fucking
Jeffries.
presidency.
Why not?
Maybe it should be Jeffries.
Jeffries. Yeah. Harris Jeffries. I don't know.
But anyway, I don't know.
We should get this podcast out because it is possible.
I've been frustrated by the wagon. Yeah. Like, that's not a wagon circle.
No, it's being honest about what we just saw and what just happened and leaving the door open for people to have honest conversations. And you know what, guys? This is what I just want to say. Of course that's happening. Everybody saw it with their eyes last night. Yeah, like this wagon circling, but like there's no way that people aren't having some honest conversations behind closed doors. And that's a pretty public leaving the door open to the conversation.
All right. My last thing, just so you guys know how terrible my night was. The MSNBC set was right next to the Fox Business set. Yeah. So at the end of the night, I had to stand there as fucking all of these assholes. I can't even say their names. The worst people in the world walked past me with a smug grin on their face. And I was a big boy. And I didn't say anything. And like the fact that I'm not in jail right now is a miracle. And then I came home and stayed up till 3:30 in the morning writing that thing. And I was supposed to be on Morning Joe at 6 in the morning and I slept through it. So I had an alarm panic. I might get fired from MSNBC. and I had to deal with the smug smile of the worst people in the world last night. So I'm not letting that any of that affect my judgment, which was clear-eyed before all of that happened, which was clear-eyed at about 9:07 p.m. last night, as a matter of fact. But wasn't a great night for Timbo. Okay.
Listen, guys, tell the truth. Everybody should just tell the truth. Okay. And like, be clear-eyed about let's not pretend things.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can still beat this fucking guy.
We can still beat him. And the only job is to beat Donald Trump. That's the job.